A former Russian double agent and his 33-year-old daughter remain critically ill in hospital after being exposed to a mysterious substance in the city of Salisbury. The circumstances surrounding the incident are now being investigated by UK counter-terrorism police. Sergei Skripal was convicted in Russia of passing state secrets to Britain, but he found refuge in the UK in 2010. The suspected poisoning of him and his daughter Yulia has echoes of the death of the Russian dissident Alexander Litvinenko, who was poisoned by polonium in 2006. A public inquiry suggested Moscow was behind the attack. Well, today the Foreign Secretary told MPs that the UK will respond robustly if Russia is found to have been involved in this current case.
I know members will have their suspicions. And what I will say to the House is that if those suspicions prove to be well-founded, then this government will take whatever measures we deem necessary to protect the lives of the people in this country, our values and our freedoms. And though I am not now pointing fingers, because we cannot, Mr. Speaker, as you'll understand, point fingers, I say to governments around the world that no attempt to take innocent life on UK soil will go either unsanctioned or unpunished.
With us now in the studio is the security expert and former UK diplomat Charles Bird, and in London is the Russian intelligence expert Bruce Jones. Thank you for joining us both. Charlie Bird, does this have the hallmarks of Russian involvement, do you think?
Yes, I mean, we haven't got very many facts at the moment, so if you like, you have to turn the question the other way around. You can't rule them out. There are certain similarities. We know that the Russians in the past have used chemical and radiological weapons or means of getting rid of opponents. So you can't rule them out.
And Bruce, what's your reading of it, Bruce Jones?
Well, equally, the Russians have got a lot of previous for this sort of thing, and scores of individuals are have been assassinated or committed suicide or died suddenly in mysterious circumstances in Russia and also other parts of the world. And we're talking here about controversial people. So there's that sort of thing. But I think I'd add that what Boris Johnson is doing is really setting a sort of policy default position that if there is something wrong, it will not go unchallenged or unpunished. Whether this was the right way or the right time to do it, well, that's something else to work out.
And Bruce, how do you think the UK should respond if it is proven to have a Russian link?
Well, it's not for me to suggest or specify, but despite the fact that we've got a lot of sanctions against Russia, there are very many Russian citizens reside in the United Kingdom. Their residence criteria could be revisited. The Russians also have various cultural organizations over here. In the West in general, some of these are just front organizations for intelligence activities. The one in Prague is well cited in secret meetings that have taken place with Donald Trump's lawyers and so forth. But British Council, etc., has been swept out the door in Russia. So there are still a number of official parts of the Russian apparatus, if you like, that could be, attention could be paid to them.
And Charlie
so it's just one way, yeah.
Yes. Charlie Bird, are we overreacting?
No, I don't think so. Because if this is something that's happened and the Russians are responsible, there has to be some sort of reaction, there has to be some sort of retaliation, or whatever. I mean, the problem is we've got very, very few levers. There are already targeted sanctions. We can't do very much at the UN because Russia's on the Security Council. In the EU, Mr. Johnson, sadly, is not regarded very highly, so it's going to be difficult to mobilise the EU. Also, we're on the way out. The Italians have just had their election. They've got two main parties, both of whom are very close to the Russians. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult to find a forum in which to take any collective action, and the sort of response that we've got, Mr. Johnson saying that we're not going to send football officials, frankly sounds rather pathetic, and it's not really within his remit to make that decision. So I think there's going to be a lot of thinking, hard thinking, going on as to what actually can be done, and we can expel declared intelligence agents, because there's always a liaison function. We can get rid of those. And I think it's going to be very important to target Putin and Putin's colleagues, if you like, and close associates, rather than just Russians in general. We want to make that very, very clear division, I think.
And Bruce, how will the Kremlin react to all of this, do you think?
Well, if they're directly concerned with this, then they hold all the cards. They know what's gone on, and they can watch us to what degree that we find out matters out and when. So they can go and react is the wrong word, respond in a variety, a spectrum, a spread of responses to the way we set about things or don't set about things. What we want to make sure is that we don't get on to a path of reflexive control where there is a poisoning, Mr. Johnson says something, then the Kremlin does something else and the whole thing escalates, and in fact it's the Kremlin that's pulling the strings.
And by Kremlin, sorry, Charlie.
Yeah, I don't think the Kremlin have to do anything. Because the thing is that Putin, if you look at him, if you Google the photographs of Putin, he likes to portray himself as this sort of bare-chested he-man riding horseback across rivers, carrying a rifle. He wants to appear the kind of the hero. He has faced down the West over Ukraine. He's faced down the West over Crimea. He's faced down the West over Syria. Litvinenko, what have we done? Absolutely nothing. He can sit there. If this is the Russians, and it comes back to them, what gives them the confidence to do it again on UK soil? Because they can, and because they can get away with it, because there's very, very little that we can do about it. Very
briefly on that point, Bruce, how much of this we refer to the Russians and to the Kremlin? This is really Putin, is it?
Well, I think it's widely acknowledged that this sort of executive action, if you like, can only happen if it's basically signed off by the head of state. There is in Russian law, and it's a very legalistic culture, that sticking to the letter, not the spirit of the law, that in fact those who deride the leadership and the principal organs of state of the Russian Federation can be taken out, for want of a better term. So yes, it does go back to the inner circles of the Kremlin.
And in a sentence, and it has to be a sentence,
sure.
I'm afraid, Charlie, it's not just the Russians who are capable of this.
No, absolutely not. I mean, if you put it in context, the Iranians have done it, the North Koreans have done it, the Americans have done it, the Israelis do it.
Okay. Everyone does it.
Everyone does it, except us.
Yes, indeed, of course. Thank you both for joining us.